I'm Gideon Taylor. I have the honor to serve as president of the World Jewish Restitution Organization, or WJRO, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar called Unlocking the Archives of the Hungarian Holocaust, a new window on the central plundering of Hungary's Jews. So this evening, this event, or this afternoon, depending where you are, and we have an international gathering of people from here in the United States, Europe, Israel. It's hosted in partnership with the Zekelman Holocaust Center, and we're honored to have a distinguished group of panelists with us today. By way of background, WJRO represents world Jewry in the pursuit of justice for Holocaust survivors and their families. We work to secure restitution and compensation for Jewish property seized during and after the Holocaust in Central and Eastern Europe. We work very closely with the Claims Conference, which I also have the honor to serve as president. So over the past year, we've made significant effort in Holocaust restitution efforts. We continue to work closely with governments and institutions worldwide to ensure that Holocaust-era looted cultural property is properly addressed, as well as dealing with issues of property generally. You may be aware of the best practices for Holocaust-era looted cultural property, which was developed by WJRO in partnership with the U.S. Department of State. And those best practices have now been endorsed by 30 countries, marking an important step forward in advancing restitution efforts. Just last year, we worked closely with policymakers, organizations, and the media to keep the issue of Holocaust-era property rights at the forefront of international discussions. And a key part of our work is not only to help advocacy around claims and to help people connect with property, but also transparency and awareness and knowledge and information. And that's what leads us today to this gathering and to this important milestone, which is the first ever online public access to a major archival collection that documents the looting of Jewish cultural property in Hungary. So before we begin, a couple of housekeeping notes. So we will take questions afterwards. What we would ask you to do is submit them through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You should be able to see a Q&A box, and you should be able to post a question there. If you have any problem with the Q&A box, you can use the chat function. I'm sure everyone these days is familiar with the chat function. So if the Q&A isn't working easily for you, just use the chat to post the questions, and we'll see how many of those we can get to. We have participants today from more than 15 countries, which really, I think, is a testament to the importance of this issue and to the fact that this is not a local or domestic issue. This is not a Hungarian issue. It's not an American issue. It's not an Israeli issue. It is truly an international issue. And the fact that the best practices is an international document, the fact that these archives are becoming accessible worldwide, the fact of the interest in this gathering today is a testament to the global nature of the world we're in and the global nature of this effort to seek justice and to create awareness and information. So just a little bit on the website. It's one of the challenges, the major challenges in Holocaust restitution generally, has been access to historical records, documents that provide crucial evidence of what was taken and from whom. So this new archive, this digital archive developed in partnership with the Zekelman Holocaust Center, aims to address that gap. The platform provides access for the first time, public access to 180 microfilm reels containing invaluable historical records. It's documents that detail the persecution, looting, and deportation of Hungarian Jews during the Holocaust. Notably, for those of you who will go and look at these, reels 143 to 145 focus specifically on the widespread theft of Jewish cultural property, documenting the confiscation of art collections, heirlooms, books, and religious objects, items that were not just valuable, but deeply personal, representing lifetimes of family history. For survivors and their heirs, and their families. This archive is a vital tool in the effort to reclaim that stolen heritage. But it's also an essential resource for researchers, historians, and all those committed to ensuring that the truth of what happened is never forgotten. So you can see in the chat box, if we can put in the link to the site, feel free to save it, to look. It's hfilms.holocaustcenter.org. We'll put it in the chat box so you'll have it there and you'll be able to see it and follow up afterwards. So to discuss this groundbreaking initiative, we're honored to have a really distinguished panel of experts with us today. So firstly, I'm pleased to introduce Rabbi Eli Mayerfeld. He's the CEO of the Zekelman Holocaust Center, where he's led the organization since 2017. Under his leadership, the center has become a leading hub for Holocaust education in Michigan, reaching over 100,000 individuals annually. He's also been deeply involved in professional training for Holocaust educators and serves on the North American Holocaust Museum Directors Working Group. Rabbi Mayerfeld holds a BS in engineering from the Cooper Union, an advanced degree in rabbinic ordination. He will share more about the Holocaust, the Zekelman Holocaust Center, and its role in making this archive publicly accessible. And it's a testament, I think, the fact he's in Michigan, I'm in New York, others are scattered around, just how we can and need to connect in order to share knowledge, information, and to bring these important stories to life. Rabbi Mayerfeld.
Thank you very much. I first just a little bit about who we are. The Zekelman Holocaust Center was founded in 1984 by Holocaust survivors who rebuilt their lives here in Michigan after the war. And today we're a 50,000 square foot museum with a staff of about 50. And our mission is to engage, educate, and empower by remembering the Holocaust. So this is really an opportunity to go into each one of those three areas. We have a permanent exhibit where visitors hear and see the personal stories of Jewish victims and the survivors of the Holocaust. And it's their testimonies that foster awareness and inspire action. And there are tens of thousands of visitors to the core exhibit, as well as over 100,000 people across the state who we impact annually. We have programs, guided tours for students and adults, and I can see the bus outside my window, workshops for educators and professionals, outreach to the Michigan's universities, and also corporate and community education. And our goal is to connect historical lessons to contemporary anti-Semitism, and we inspire critical thinking, we equip individuals to build a more compassionate and tolerant, inclusive society. And you can learn more about us at holocaustcenter.org, and you can also reach the microfilms from there. About the archives, about these Hungarian microfilms. Professor Randolph Bram of blessed memory obtained records in the National Archive of Hungary and other official repositories in Hungary of these archival materials that he was doing research on. He made 4 sets of these reels, and he gave one set to Yad Vashem, one to USHMM in DC, and one to YIVO. The 4th set, after he was done with his research, he donated that set here to the HC without any restrictions in 1992. At the time, we were really the first freestanding Holocaust museum in America. And the reels were an untapped resource for many years, until you're going to hear from Clara Garbon-Radnoti, who's a Holocaust survivor and a volunteer here, who agreed to start working on them to begin making them accessible. These reels have included in them the great information on the greatest displacement of art in human history, 300,000 pieces that were scattered across the globe. 20% of Europe's artwork was looted by the Nazis. Also in these reels are the names of individuals, neighborhoods, Jews who were taken, including 120,000 victims of the Holocaust. Clara's aunt was amongst those whose names appear in these reels. The goal is for these learning about through these reels to return dignity to everyone who was murdered, to those who survived and lost everything. Our efforts reflect a profound commitment to education, remembrance, and justice. We want to open new pathways for understanding the Holocaust and the nearly destroyed Hungarian Jewish community, and we want to empower restitution efforts for those seeking justice. And so we thank the Claims Conference and WJRO for their partnership in making these available. This has been a multi-year project from us in order to be able to make this website available. The work that Clara did created a finding aid so that people can search through them. And now she actually individually translated the art reels, were translated by hand. And then through technology, we've made computerized translations available of the others to allow for searching as well. Thank you very much, Gideon.
Great, thank you, and thank you for all that you do. It's wonderful to have that passion and energy at the center, and it's good to hear of the important work that the center does, and to show and be able to showcase it here through this. So I want to turn next to Wesley Fisher. Wesley serves as the Director of Research for WJRO and the Claims Conference, where he leads efforts to advance Holocaust-era restitution, particularly for looted art and cultural property. He's played a pivotal role in establishing the Washington Conference principles on Nazi confiscated art, and he's worked globally to promote provenance research and access to Holocaust-related archives. So Dr. Fisher will speak about the history of these archival reels, WJRO's connection to them, and the important role of Dr. Randolph Brehm, who donated these reels. Wesley, thank you for being here today.
As many of you may know, the World Jewish Restitution Organization is connected to the Claims Conference, to the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany. Actually, Gideon Taylor is the president of both organizations at the present time. Generally, there's a sense that I know that the Claims Conference only began giving grants for things like this in the 1990s after the reunification of Germany, and basically it's been a recent matter. But it's not a recent matter. In fact, in the 1960s, there were grants given to Professor Brehm and also to the World Federation of Hungarian Jews. And it was this money that essentially allowed this to be done. The fact that is, however, that Hungary has a long history, some of which is very difficult in particularly this area. So as you may know, the pre-war Jewish community of Hungary suffered enormous losses during the Holocaust. Approximately 550,000 Hungarian Jews were killed, 2/3 of Hungary's pre-war population. And in addition, Jews were systematically robbed of their every possession before their deportation and murder. That is indeed something which was done first by the Horthy government, not by Germany, but then eventually under the German Nazis, it was increased greatly towards the end of the war and was the fastest killing that took place during all of this. It was also tremendous theft during this time. There have been discussions over the years regarding property in Hungary, and some things have been taken care of immediately after the war, and in general, it's not so bad if one looks at the fate of communal property in Hungary. That has been pretty much settled in regard to the synagogues and cemeteries and the like. In terms of the movable property, Judaica, actually ritual Judaica, communal ritual Judaica, has generally been returned. However, things start becoming more difficult if one looks at the private property matters. In terms of private real estate, there have been difficulties in terms of who is eligible to claim such real estate and difficulties with citizenship matters and the like. But the main thing that remains is unclaimed movable property, or unclaimed property generally, but including immovable. But unclaimed movable property is a major matter. We in WJRO have been in discussions with the government of Hungary for many years over this issue of heirless and unclaimed property. For the benefit of Holocaust survivors, it's rather important because it's money that it eventually may produce money that it can in fact help them in their later years. And moreover, it was an explicit obligation on the part of Hungary to give such reparations under the 1947 Treaty of Paris with the United States and other allied governments. However, 80 years after the end of the Holocaust, this remains an unresolved issue. In 2007, negotiations between the government of Hungary and the WJRO resulted in Hungary agreeing to conduct research to identify heirless and unclaimed property that was wrongfully taken from Jewish victims, and in order to generally facilitate settlement of outstanding property issues. At the same time, in 2007, the Hungarian government pledged $21 million to be distributed over the course of 5 years to assist Holocaust survivors in Hungary. And this was essentially an initial down payment toward a future agreement on heirless and unclaimed property. But beyond that, nothing happened. Finally, between the WJRO and the Hungarian government, during the years 2016 and January 2021, there was agreement that there would be further research by Hungary. And indeed, there was research done on a whole host of subjects that are relevant. These research projects, however, were seen as not sufficient and not complete by the experts who were reporting to us. But in particular, there was one thing missing. Even though Hungary did research on looted art, it did not produce a report that it was supposed to on the art that had been taken, on the cultural property that had been taken generally. This was the one area in which there was nothing. As a result, it became quite clear that we needed to look at this issue, and the question was how to go about it. During these years, it became known that the Zekelman Center had indeed begun to look at these various rolls of microfilm that Professor Braham had donated to it, and that it was something which Clara Garbon-Radnoti was working on, and there were some things about it. And it therefore became something where I approached the Zekelman Center and asked Rabbi Mayerfeld if it was possible to put these on the internet. The answer we decided together was yes, and the Zekelman Center therefore proceeded to do a lot to put this onto the internet, thereby changing things greatly. These are archives which have been known to specialists on Hungary. They've been known to some Hungarian researchers. However, unlike German, English, French, Italian, and so on, Hungarian is not a widespread language. It is not generally understood by most people. As Gideon Taylor has noted, this is an international matter. And for people to understand what was taken and to understand what there is possibly still, it was very important to take a look specifically at these archives in regard to the looted cultural property, in addition to everything that is there that covers many of the aspects of the Holocaust in Hungary. May I say that it is clear from these reels the extent to which the National Museum in Budapest was used as a central collecting point. And it was not only a place where the art and other things were collected, not only from what is now Hungary, but also from Greater Hungary, or the areas of Romania and other countries that Hungary occupied. And that basically these are records which also show the distribution after the war of many of these items, because they were clearly kept by the government of Hungary and distributed there. Please note that there are other items that were taken by the Soviet trophy brigades, some of which is known, and that were taken from Hungary, and therefore Hungary still has items which are missing from that period. But that doesn't take away from the importance of the Hungarian government looking at its own holdings. Provenance research has not been developed in Hungary. Provenance research has been done a little bit, but very, very scantily. This is not like the other countries of Europe where there is a clear development of provenance research on and dealing with the question of what the previous ownership was. These records are part of an important part of what makes that possible. And I must say that on this, it's a little bit distressing because or more than a little bit distressing, because Hungary did endorse the Washington Conference Principles in 1998, and it did endorse the Terezin Declaration of 2009. It has not yet endorsed the best practices that Gideon Taylor referred to. In any event, so it's still, in other words, this is still a problem and one which needs to be dealt with very clearly.
And Wesley, I think let's come back to, after we've spent a little time just looking a little bit about the archives, let's come back to this question of, I see a couple of questions in the chat about where we stand exactly on reparations. So terrific, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we'll circle back to that. What I'd like to do next is to introduce Andrea Dunai, who's a provenance researcher and genealogist with extensive experience working in German and Hungarian archives and international databases. Her research focuses on Hungarian German history, the Holocaust, and provenance investigation. So right at the meeting point of exactly what we're looking at. She's an accomplished author whose work has been featured on radio programs and publications. And we are so grateful to her for joining us today to give important historical context, both about the Jewish community in Hungary during the Holocaust and to highlight materials from the archive that help uncover these lost stories. Andrea.
Thank you. Good evening and good afternoon. Wait a second. I open my presentation. Yes, here we are. So I would like to outline what happened to the art objects owned by the Jews in 1944 in Budapest. Wehrmacht occupied Hungary on the 19th of March 1944. This occupation restrained Hungary's sovereignty. The official Budapest Bulletin was published 14 times in April. In those 14 issues, the word Jew or Jewish appeared 146 times, and 22 anti-Jewish decrees were published. From the aspects of our subject is the decree number 1600 was important. According to this, all Jews residing in Hungary were required to declare their assets, in our case, the art objects. The reported artworks were locked up, but this procedure was just an administrative act. It became earlier or sooner clear that the art object should be dealt with in due time. In May, the Hungarian press was full of similar headlines to these two examples. At the end of the month, Dénes Csanki, director of the Museum of Fine Arts, was appointed as the government commissioner to review and preserve the locked-up art objects of the Jews. Remember his face because he is going to be the protagonist of our story. The mentioned 3 reels on the website of the Zekelman Center, indexed and commented by Clara Garbon-Radnoti, do contain the documents elaborated by Csanki's commission. Let's focus on the happenings in the capital. Imagine relatively small Budapest, where hundreds of wealthy Jewish citizens lived, many of whom collected artworks. Scared of the bombings that began in the year 1942, some of them placed their artworks in bank vaults, but the majority kept the objects in their homes. Chunky knew personally many of the collectors. Let me illustrate his activity with two examples. The first slide is the front page of Chunky's index book. Let's start with Arthur Reisner. I marked his name in yellow. He lived in the magnificent Andrássy Avenue. On the first document, we see a confirmation according to which 32 objects, pictures, and paintings were taken over by the Commission on the 1st of July 1944 in Reisner's flat. And as to the second document, these objects in fact appeared in the museum on the 21st of July. Both of the documents were signed by Miklos Chunky, Danish Chunky's son. So, and it is also typical of Hungary, the commission must have worked as a family enterprise. The first object on the list is an oil painting by the Hungarian master Sándor Nyilasi with the title Sunday Afternoon. I am not sure if Nyilasi painted just one version of this topic or more, but one Sunday afternoon in a similar size was sold by a Hungarian auction house some years ago. It is unknown if Chunky's men had met personally all the collectors in their homes, because Jews in Budapest were forced in June to leave their homes and move to designated Jewish houses. If everything went smoothly, and I have to emphasize if, the collected artworks were taken first to the Museum of Fine Arts and registered there in the inventory. They were considered as belongings of the museum. In the fall of 1944, when the political establishment, scared of the proceeding Russian army, ordered the evacuation of cultural and industrial goods to German and Austrian territory, Chunky transported the most valuable pieces from his museum and those taken from the Jews to West Hungary, into the monastery of Pannonhalma, and later into the monastery of Szent Gotthard on the Hungarian-Austrian border. He succeeded in obtaining a train, packed the cases into it, and the train crossed the border on the last day of March 1945 and arrived in Grassau, Bavaria. You see this picture on the right. Chunky and his closest friend settled down in Café Panorama and placed the cases on the basement. At that time, several Hungarian functionaries who fled Hungary appeared around the corner to help Chunky. One state secretary of the Ministry of Culture tried to find contacts in an unknown environment. He sent out, at the end of April, handwritten and typed letters in German, but addressed them to nobody. We are in the last days of the collapse. The 3 attendants of the art treasure train turned on the 1st of June to the American military government and asked to help, not knowing exactly which support they really wish. 3 weeks later, monumentsman Captain Thomas Carhow appeared in Grassau and took over 80 boxes and 2 parcels and delivered them to the collecting point in Munich. He described his encounter with Chunky in his memoirs published in 1946. I would like to ask Wesley to read out some paragraphs in American English.
The work went along smoothly, and we were just finishing the second truck when I saw two men approaching. They were Dr. Chanke and his son. The doctor was a dapper little fellow with a white mustache and very black eyes. He was wearing a corduroy jacket and a flowing bow tie. His son was a callow string bean. They came over to the truck and began to wave their arms. We paid no attention whatever, just kept on lifting one case after another out of the storage room. The dapper doctor got squarely in my path, and I had to stop. I checked his flow of words with a none too civil, "Do you speak English?" That drew a blank, so I asked if he spoke German. No luck there either. I inquired whether he spoke French. He said yes, but the stream of Hungarian French which rolled out from that white mustache was hopeless. By the time we had the third truck ready to move away, they were back. Two women were with them. One was rather handsome. She explained in perfect English that Dr. Chanke had come to her in great distress. Would I be so kind as to tell her what was happening so that she could inform him? "I am removing these cases on the authority of the commanding general of the 3rd United States Army," I said. She relayed this information to Dr. Chanke, and the effect was startling. He covered his face with his hands, and I thought he was going to cry.
Thank you, Wesley. Thank you. By every indication, Hungarians have difficulties with pronunciation in foreign languages. We have just arrived at the point where I can show you our second case. On the right side, I marked the name of József Pécsi, who lived in the Dorottya Street. He was a photographer. This letter is a very important document because we learn that it was him who turned to Chanke in November, asking him to bring the art objects to the museum. We know from his biography that he succeeded to go to leave Budapest and arrived in Transylvania, which still belonged to Hungary. So it makes a big difference if the art objects arrived in the museum in summer or months later. In the first case, as I already have mentioned, they were registered in the inventory of the museum and stationed in December already in the more or less safe Western Hungary. In the second case, the items were delivered to the museum and most probably stayed there. In the first image, we have the list of the collected artworks of Pécsi. Here I picked up the last one, object 39, a colored lithography by Vincent Grimm, an artist and Hungarian chess player, recollection to Pest and Ofen, Buda, in March 1838, during the flood. I like these records because they reflect the taste of the Hungarian Jewish collectors. In the meantime, things changed. After the siege of Budapest, the downtown of the capital was destroyed. Pécsi's Art Deco house, as original view on the right side. The second picture depicts the exploded chain bridge, 5 minutes walk from Pécsi's house, and the third one, the street or the square behind Pécsi's house. It is not easy to draw up a resume about Chanke's activity. Fact is that Dénes Chanke, as an official of the Horthy regime, refused to return to the communist Hungary and emigrated from the American zone to Brazil. He was declared as an enemy in his homeland until the change of regime. It is evident that if the artworks collected by him had remained in Hungary, they would have soon perished or fallen into Soviet hands, just as the paintings stored in bank vaults were taken to the Soviet Union by the Red Army. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Andrea. Really, really interesting, and beautifully illustrated. So let me turn now to Clara. You've heard about Clara Garbon-Radnoti. So she's a Hungarian Holocaust survivor, an archivist, translator, researcher, and really without Clara, this archive would not be accessible. She has expertise in language, history, genealogy. She spent, I believe, 20 years working on creating a comprehensive reference guide for the collection, ensuring that the documentation can be used as a resource. And the reels that Clara has made accessible contain tens of thousands of names of Holocaust victims. Um, so, Clara, maybe I can just ask you, as a Holocaust survivor, what does it mean to you? Just tell us a little bit about how you came to start this project and why.
I felt it's very important for the future generation to know what happened. After I used to live in New York City, and after my husband passed away, I moved back to Detroit, and I felt that I have to do something with my free time and work with this Holocaust problems which we had. And I was told that I can come here to this center and do translations and explanation of the papers what they were found from the Holocaust era. So I felt that if I dedicate my time for this, for the future generation, is a very important factor to know what happened and to see what it should not be done or should be done not to happen. So this was my aim, and this is what I wanted to do. And I started to come to the premises, pick up some papers. And at that time, the internet was already starting to be more reliable. Therefore, I received two computers and from the center, and I worked at home in my spare times, and I did translations which were transmitted by the center to me via internet. And these translations, then I returned after I have done it, and sometimes I came to the center itself to discuss certain problems what we had. So this was my work, and I felt it's very important, but basically also important for the future generation. I also made speeches to people, particularly school children between the age of 12 to 18, and they were so attentive that it was surprising, because usually children in gatherings, they move around and talk, but not this time. They were listening with big open ears what's going on. And many times even the children went home and talked to their parents, and then the parents came to the center, to the Holocaust Center, and asked us to ask personal questions. They were so much interested and impressed of what the children were talking about. So basically, this is what was my work, and I hope I'll be able still to continue, even though I feel physically 120 years old, but mentally still about 40 or 50.
Clara, it is just so inspiring to hear your voice, to hear your passion, and to hear you
And my
take
accent.
The accent too. The just to hear to take that you've taken everything you went through and to use it to translate the past into something for the future. Um, Maybe you can also just tell us a little the background. I had the privilege of meeting the remarkable Dr. Randolph Braham just once, and a remarkable historian of Hungarian Jewry during the Holocaust, a remarkable man. Maybe you can just share just a little bit about him and your connection and family connection to him.
Dr. Braham was from the same area where my husband was. They served together in the labor camp. And when after the war, they became our personal friends, and we got together with the family many times. And I was very much involved in their discussions about what was and what's gonna happen. And when Dr. Braham has done with his writings, because he was writing about mainly the 19th and 20th century Jews in Europe, and he used all kinds of materials which originally he was able to get from the communist government of Hungary at the time. And after he finished his job, he figured, what am I gonna do with these papers? So at that time, the Holocaust Museum in the Zekelman Center here in Michigan was one of the first existing one and very active. So he decided to donate the papers to the center, to this center, the Zekelman Center. And actually, this is what we kept always. I lived in New York, and we kept always contact with him, and we discussed many times the events. And I think that his view was very clear about the happenings, the history of Judaism in Hungary during the Holocaust era.
I think, look, we're really privileged to have had a Dr. Braham, to have you, Clara, to be really to shed a light and to lead a way for a younger generation, and then indeed a younger generation after that, to help preserve knowledge, information, and now to make it accessible. So really, we owe you a deep debt of gratitude that you are the vehicle in this particular collection who's taking what sits in an archive inaccessible and make it accessible for a wider world. So let me just throw a question out to any of the panelists, and there are some questions which I want to come back to, which I'll come back to about Hungary generally. Just one question about the archive itself. So if people want to come and look at this, what can they find? What would be of interest? And obviously, it's an archive. It's not a database. But maybe one of you, I don't know who's best would want to answer that.
I think Wesley probably want to take a shot at it, but otherwise,
Wesley, go for it.
go ahead and unmute yourself.
Wesley Fisher.
So there are 180 microfilm rolls. Of them, only 3 are dealing with the question of cultural property that was taken. The others, which is vast majority, are dealing with the deportations, with the murder, and that is, of course, highly important. I mean, it's in general in Holocaust studies, that's the main matter that's looked at. It happens that this history is known partly because these archives are indeed available, have been available for some time if you go to the institution involved and you know how to read Hungarian. But most people don't have that ability and don't know how don't know to do that. So as a result, this is very interesting from the standpoint of also immovable property. It's also interesting from the standpoint of how the Holocaust was organized in Hungary. It is interesting from the standpoint of what was done under the Horthy government before the German occupation as such. I mean, they were always allies of Germany, but they were occupied later. And this is also, in terms of the cultural property, quite interesting because it was a wealthy community, at least in part, and it had a lot, and culture is a major part of Hungarian life and of Hungarian Jewish life. And I have to say that from that standpoint, this is a major addition to all the discussions that circulate around cultural property.
Perhaps Clara, could Clara describe what she saw from her own aunt's home, the inventory of things that were taken from that home? Can you unmute Clara and have her talk about it?
Yeah. Clara?
Yes.
Did you hear the question about, would you just talk about what you found about your aunt, just so people can understand what kind of archival, to give us a little glimpse into the kind of material that's
Well, I
available.
should say that my background was naturally, I was born in Budapest and raised there. And until 1944, March 19th, it wasn't as bad as it should have been. The country was emptied, the countryside, the whole country by Jews, and they were deported. But Budapest, which had most of the Jews, naturally, they left it for last. And by the time they should have been able to deport everybody, also from Budapest, they couldn't because they needed the transportation of troops to go to war. And since Romania, between Romania and Austria, Hungary was in between. This is where the transportation had to be done for the war efforts. Therefore, in 1940, until 1944, March 19th, nothing was that bad. But
Right.
March 19th, after March 19th, as they say, hell broke loose.
Right. Right. And one question, did you, in the archives, in the material that you worked with, what did you find about your family in this
Nothing.
Zekelman archive?
Not about my family. Nothing about my family.
family.
It was all about everybody else.
How about your aunt, Clara?
My aunt, nothing.
I thought that you had seen the inventory of what was taken from her home. Am I misremembering?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Well, okay, really. So wow, what you've done, really, Clara, really amazing. Okay, so let's take the sort of a number of questions, and I'm not quite sure how to take them all. Just one on a more technical level. The question was, will there be a recording of this? And the answer is yes, it will be available, and we'll send a link to attendees. So just share that with all of you. There's some questions generally about Hungary and restitution in Hungary. And maybe I'll just talk to that for a moment, and then Wesley can feel free to jump in. Wesley talked a little bit about it at the beginning in his comments. There were, as Wesley mentioned, a number of steps taken by the Hungarian government regarding restitution, limited restitution in the post-communist era. The major areas that I think are still open and were unaddressed, and certainly even those efforts were very limited, but there were certain efforts and certain legislation, are twofold. One is the issue around unclaimed property and what should happen and what did happen to that and what could happen to that. So that's one item on which there has not been resolution with the Hungarian government. And the other is around the issue of art and cultural property. And that's common in many of the countries in Eastern Europe, where in whatever settlements or agreements there were in the post-communist era, issues of art were tended to be left outside or carved outside for the simple reason that the level of knowledge and awareness is so limited. People don't know what was taken, they don't know what their families had. Unlike real property, where there are records, often records, central records. That's not the case for items of art and cultural property. And that's why it's so significant. That's why I think the issue of art has remained so difficult to address in any way at all. And I think the reality is, and I see one of the questions coming in, how much art has been recovered. The reality is that the scale of theft in Europe, speaking generally, was huge, and what's been returned is a small fragment. And that goes, I think, for Hungary and certainly for Europe generally. And I think that's sort of a task that's in front of all of us, and that's why these kind of archives and this kind of research is so important to make information available to people to potentially pursue claims. I'm going to just sort of look at some of the questions there. Wesley, have you had a chance to look at those, and maybe you want to jump in on any of those?
I would just comment that under communism, of course, all these various cultural items, in particular the paintings, have generally been made public, have been made open to the public. You can go to the museums and you can see many of them. However, it was also the idea that this was somehow a part of the heritage of given countries, and that's where they should remain. This is not quite reasonable because, in fact, at least the information, the historical information about private property would be something that should be known, even if there is a decision to keep such items within the countries. This is a problem in many post-communist countries.
So looking at some of the questions that received, let me just sort of try and sort of touch upon them. In terms of Germany, are there reparations programs against the German government? So I'd urge you to look at the website of the Claims Conference. If you just Google Claims Conference, there's a website. There are various programs for Holocaust survivors who suffered in different ways that are still open, for which claims can still be made. So that is certainly the source for the for information regarding claims against Germany. Regarding claims against Hungary, you can look at the website of WJRO, and I think we could put maybe both of those in the chat of Claims Conference and WJRO. Samantha, maybe you can include the websites for both of those. So there you'll see information by country regarding what potentially is possible. It's obviously a huge complicated question, but certainly in all of those situations, the issues of artwork are not resolved in general, or certainly not completely resolved. Difficult to deal with the Hungarian government, yes, certainly that's been an issue, and we will continue to engage with the Hungarian government on this issue. I saw it was interesting. One of the questions or the comments indicated that the questioner's, the commenter's mother was able to claim a single painting from the Museum of Art after she returned from Auschwitz as an orphan. She brought that painting with her when she immigrated to New York in 1948, and I now own it. It's a pastoral scene painted by Bella Ivani Grunwald. So something very beautiful to hear that. And I think that certainly hopefully gives people strength for pursuing what can be a difficult and complicated restitution. And I think it's also important to say that many of items of artwork, we tend to think of the Picassos and the Sheilas and the very well-known pieces of artwork, but the reality is that most pieces of art and cultural property were of limited value, small financial value, but immense, immense personal value. And in fact, one case that we're helping a family with, or seeking to help a family with, is for a shofar, the return of a shofar from Hungary that's held in a town. So I think it's very important to just bear in mind how the kind of data that's in this archive and beyond is about not necessarily about the great and the mighty and the well-known, but also on the routine and the normal and the ordinary. In terms of specific questions, we'll have a look, and if there's any specific questions that we can answer. I know there's research available for families, and I see Jewish Gen as a comment there. We certainly encourage people to use Jewish Gen to trace family origins. Are any of the other panelists looking at any of the questions that you wanted to jump on? There's a lot of questions here, and I know we don't have very long.
I noticed there's this question regarding whether or not the Hungarian government actively attempted to regain custody of art from Hungary that was sent to Germany. And indeed, the thing I would say is that from the central collecting points of the Allies, that is, say, from the Munich collecting point and otherwise, there were items that were sent to the communist countries, including Hungary. But that's, I mean, including, by the way, the Soviet Union, which typically has not, to this day, really recognized that they received things. But that's part of this, but that's only a partial answer because they were sent to the governments, and the governments therefore kept these things. It doesn't mean that they were then returned to the individuals involved.
So I think in terms of the questions, what I'm going to do is ask the team, when we do send out the recording, maybe we can touch upon some of those questions, those specific questions about where one can do further research on related to Hungary specifically. So maybe we can, Lisa, who put this together, you can help put together also, and the team may some answers to those questions. So we will try and answer those and share that information. Questions about proof and so on are complicated and difficult, but there are ways, there have been successes, and we'll include within the email to all of you just an update generally on art issues and some more background so that you can follow up on those issues. So I'm mindful of the time and everyone's time, and I really wanted to just a huge thank you here to our panelists, so thoughtful, insightful, and really to those of you who worked on bringing together this archive. It's an extraordinary resource. I think one that is relevant for today and will be relevant for years to come. The Zekelman Center, I particularly want to thank Zekelman Holocaust Center for their invaluable partnership and engagement. So I just wanted to update you that this is a series that is organized by WJRO. Lisa Sherman-Cohen, who put this together on behalf of WJRO, has a series called My Property Stories, #MyPropertyStory, which we bring out each year to try to give space to stories, to give voice to stories. The next one will be in the spring, called Cherished Possessions. It will focus on personal items that families lost during the Holocaust, objects that carry deep sentimental and historical value. So whether it's a photograph, a piece of jewelry, a book, a religious artifact, we encourage you to participate and share your stories. The link, it's on our website, wjro.org.il/MPS. Maybe we can put that in the, I think it is actually, I see in the chat. And we'll also include it in the email link. And I think that makes the point that each one of those stories, and if you have something treasured that you lost, it's important. We may not be able to help you. We don't deal with individual claims, and we don't help individual claimants. That's not our role. Our role is to advocate for legislation, advocate for information, advocate for systems and processes that will enable people to reconnect with these precious items of cultural heritage. And please do share on the social media campaign as we launch it, and we will let you know about it. Please do share that, because I think it's important for these stories to be kept alive. So thank you all. I wish you all a good day, and we'll continue to be in contact and to be in touch as we try to preserve memory, to educate future generations, and to honor people like Clara for what she's done and continues to do, and how she continues to inspire us. So thank you all.